the story of Job in the Bible. Welcome to my video. Today, we will journey through one of the most remarkable accounts recorded in the scriptures, the story of Job. This account reveals that even the most faithful servants of God may face severe trials, yet the Lord remains sovereign, righteous, and worthy of complete trust. The story of Job is not merely about suffering. It is about unwavering faith, the wisdom of God, and the certainty that God's purposes are always greater than human understanding. The Bible introduces Job as a man who lived in the land of Uz. He was described as blameless and upright, a man who feared God and turned away from evil. Job was blessed with great wealth, many servants, vast flocks, and a large family consisting of 7 sons and 3 daughters. His life reflected both material prosperity and spiritual devotion. He regularly offered sacrifices to God on behalf of his children, desiring that they remain right before the Lord, even if they had unknowingly sinned. Behind the scenes, however, an extraordinary event unfolded in heaven. Satan appeared before God among the heavenly beings. The Lord pointed to Job as his faithful servant, declaring that there was no one like him on the earth. Satan challenged Job's devotion, arguing that Job feared God only because he had been blessed with protection, prosperity, and success. Satan claimed that if these blessings were removed, Job would surely curse God. The Lord, in his sovereign authority, permitted Satan to test Job, though clear limits were established. Satan could touch Job's possessions, but not Job himself. Soon afterward, disaster struck with overwhelming speed. Raiders stole Job's oxen and donkeys, fire consumed his sheep, enemies captured his camels, and servants were killed. The greatest tragedy followed when a powerful wind caused the house where Job's children were gathered to collapse, taking the lives of all 10 of them. Faced with unimaginable grief, Job tore his robe, shaved his head, and fell to the ground in worship. Instead of cursing God, he declared, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all these events, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. His response remains one of the greatest examples of genuine faith recorded in the Bible. Once again, Satan appeared before God and insisted that Job remain faithful only because his own body had not yet suffered. Satan argued that physical pain would cause Job to abandon his faith. God again allowed Satan to test Job, but forbade him from taking Job's life. Soon, Job was afflicted with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. His suffering became so severe that he sat among ashes, scraping his sores with a piece of broken pottery. Even Job's wife, overwhelmed by sorrow, urged him to curse God and die. Yet Job answered that people should accept both prosperity and adversity from the hand of God. Even in deep pain, he refused to speak against the Lord. 3 of Job's friends heard about his suffering and came to comfort him. When they first saw him from a distance, they hardly recognized him because of his terrible condition. They wept loudly, tore their robes, sprinkled dust upon their heads, and sat silently with Job for 7 days and 7 nights because they saw that his grief was exceedingly great. After this long silence, Job spoke. He did not curse God, but he lamented the day of his birth. He expressed the depth of his sorrow and questioned why he had been allowed to live through such overwhelming pain. His words reflected honest anguish rather than unbelief. Throughout his suffering, Job continued to seek answers from the God whom he trusted. Before the conversations between Job and his friends begin, it is important to recognize that the greatest conflict in this account is not merely between Job and his suffering, but between human understanding and God's perfect wisdom. Job could not see what had taken place in heaven, and his friends could not comprehend the true reason for his affliction. Yet through every painful moment, God remained present, sovereign, and fully aware of everything that was happening. As the story continues, we will discover how Job responds to repeated accusations, how he continues to seek the Lord despite his unanswered questions, and how God ultimately reveals his majesty in a way that transforms everyone involved. The lessons that follow remain deeply relevant for every believer who desires to trust God through life's greatest trials. At this stage, if this video is interesting, Take a moment to engage with it by liking, commenting, and sharing it. Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, began to speak after Job expressed his grief. They believed that suffering was always the direct result of personal sin. Each friend insisted that Job must have committed some hidden wickedness and urged him to confess so that God would restore him. Their speeches reflected human reasoning rather than God's perfect wisdom. Although they intended to help, they misunderstood both Job's character and the true purpose behind his suffering. Job answered each of them with honesty and conviction. He maintained that he had not abandoned God or lived in deliberate rebellion against him. While he admitted that no human being is completely righteous before the Lord, he rejected the false accusation that his suffering proved he was living a secret life of sin. Job longed to present his case before God, believing that the Lord knew the truth of his heart. Even amid confusion, Job declared one of the Bible's greatest expressions of faith when he said, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth." His confidence rested not in his own goodness, but in the living God. As the discussions continued, another man named Elihu spoke. He rebuked both Job and his friends. Elihu argued that God's wisdom is far beyond human understanding, and that suffering can also serve as a means of correction, instruction, and spiritual growth. Although Elihu did not possess complete knowledge of God's purpose, he rightly emphasized that no one should accuse God of injustice. Then the Lord himself answered Job out of a whirlwind. Rather than explaining every detail of Job's suffering, God revealed his unmatched greatness through a series of questions. He asked Job where he had been when the foundations of the earth were laid. He questioned whether Job could command the morning, control the seas, direct the stars, or provide food for the wild animals. God described the wonders of his creation, demonstrating his limitless wisdom, power, and authority over heaven and earth. As Job listened, he recognized how small human understanding is compared to the infinite knowledge of God. He humbly confessed that he had spoken about things too wonderful for him to comprehend. Job repented of speaking without full understanding and bowed before the Lord in humility. His faith had been refined through suffering, and he now knew God in a deeper and more personal way. The Lord then addressed Job's 3 friends. God declared that they had not spoken what was right about him as Job had. He instructed them to offer sacrifices, and he told them that Job would pray for them. Job faithfully interceded on their behalf, demonstrating forgiveness and compassion even toward those who had wrongly judged him. After Job prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes. God blessed him with twice as much as he had before. His family and friends returned to comfort him, and the Lord blessed him with greater wealth, larger flocks, and abundant possessions. Job was also blessed with 7 more sons and 3 more daughters, whose beauty was celebrated throughout the land. He lived many more years, witnessing several generations of his descendants before dying at an old age, full of years. The story of Job reminds every believer that faith is not measured by the absence of suffering, but by steadfast trust in God during life's greatest trials. We may not always understand why hardship comes, but we can be certain that God remains righteous, faithful, and in complete control. He sees what we cannot see, accomplishes purposes beyond our understanding, and never abandons those who place their trust in him. Job's account also teaches us to avoid judging others based solely on their circumstances. Only God fully knows every heart and every purpose. Our calling is to remain faithful, encourage one another, and trust the Lord even when his plans remain hidden. The God who sustained Job continues to sustain his people today. Those who endure in faith can rest in the assurance that God's wisdom is perfect, his mercy is abundant, and his promises never fail. Now, finally, before you leave, if this video is valuable, do not forget to engage with it by liking, commenting, and sharing it. Endeavor to watch my other videos, also to learn more. Goodbye until my next videos.